Hey friends, welcome back to We Should Do This More Often. I'm Ashley. Today we're doing something a little bit different.
So Ashley and I felt like it was a really necessary thing for us to both include our stories. We know our stories. People who are the closest to us know our stories, but I do think there is an important element here of just transparency with our listeners.
This episode, you are going to hear Andrea's story. She's going to dive deep into the moments that changed her world and how she confronted hypocrisy in the church and her own family, and the surprising freedom that came when she dropped the mask. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or defined by your past, this episode's for you. Okay, Andrea, if you were to describe the heart of your journey to someone that has never heard your story before, something that links everything all together, what would you say?
When I was thinking about my story, one particular word kept popping in my head, and it was authenticity. And my story, it centers around abandonment from my father, abandonment, between the relationship that I have with my mother and I, my grandmother passing away, the abandonment I felt there, and in some friendships, there was abandonment. But I did not want that to be the story. I did not want that to be the defining point of my life. I did not want that to be who I labeled myself as, a victim of abandonment.
I think that's really powerful, though. I love how you chose authenticity over allowing abandonment to define you. When did you first realize this isn't going to be my label anymore?
Yeah, so those early years, it was kind of like that picturesque 80s family. My mom married my biological father. He was a man that had a lot of big dreams. He wanted to be a pastor. He worked to provide for our family. My mom was the stay-at-home mom, and she really supported his vision, his desire, and his dream. But he ended up having an affair. My brother was 2 and I was 4. And one day when we were at church, he left and took his things and just did not come back. And that was kind of my first experience with abandonment. And my mother did not have a job. She was a stay-at-home mom. We eventually lost our house. She had no other resources. So she decided she was going to go back to school and become a nurse. That never worked out. We ended up having to move into Section 8 housing. And that opened up a whole new world to my mom. She ended up getting on painkillers, which was a common thing in the 90s. It just kind of spiraled down from there. But kind of the beginning piece of all that was my father abandoning us. And then the gaslighting that took place during all of that with his family and with him. And, he's a man of God. And it really kind of started this whole journey, seeing contradictions and fake, and everything is just a big facade. And I did not like that feeling because I was the person that was being hidden.
So you went really from this cookie cutter life to a pretty seismic shift. So you've mentioned having like a spiritual radar for spotting fakery. Where do you think that came from, and how did it tie into feeling unwanted or forgotten by your dad when he remarried and essentially left you behind?
Totally. I can sniff out fake, and I know that I don't like being around a certain person who has those qualities. Dad married, and they end up adopting a little girl, and he basically just pretended he didn't have a family after that. And I remember going to his and my stepmom's 25th wedding renewal of vows, people were like, who are you? And I would say, I'm Mike's daughter. And I look just like him. And they were just like, I didn't know he had another daughter. I'm like, oh yeah, he's got a son too. And I remember in the beginning, after their divorce, like my grandma would pick us up. And like, we would just constantly ask, like, are we going to get to see our dad? Are we going to get to see our dad? Oh no, he's busy. He's doing something at church. He's doing all this stuff. And so I got to see the fakeness. I'm friends with family on Facebook, and I get to see them, glamorize my father for being a man of faith. But yet we gaslight the fact that he did anything wrong. It's like we almost have given him this Christian, forgiveness of like, oh no, it's okay that you left your family because you're a chosen person of God and you can just, you're forgiven. Well, yeah, you're forgiven, but there's also an accountability that comes with that as well, right? I mean, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm forgiven and then just forget about the people that you hurt and the damage that you caused. So growing up, I had a lot of views on Christianity. And like my brother, he doesn't believe in a God because of my dad's side of the family.
It is heartbreaking to see somebody you love put on that kind of front and for others to go along with it. I'm sorry you witnessed that kind of hypocrisy. Forgiveness shouldn't replace accountability. So what happened after your grandmother passed away? How did her death shape your journey?
So she passed away, and it was a very a very, very dark time. I never felt like I was good enough, pretty enough, thin enough back then. And so when my grandma passed, it just kind of opened this whole different world up of there was this this weight lifted off of me in some way. Like I didn't have to be perfect anymore. I didn't have to do everything Iva's way. Like there was this lifting of this veil of I could be myself, and that was empowering.
You've shared how authenticity became your anchor early on, but I know you went through some really tough times in your college years, even facing homelessness. Can you walk us through that season and tell us how those experiences shaped your faith and your decision to sort of drop the facade and embrace who you really are?
I spent a majority of my college years homeless. I was bouncing from people's house to house, and I mean, at one point, I was sleeping in somebody's closet. But I started to realize that the weight of this fakeness and this gaslighting and this story that we put out there of ourselves, I saw with my grandmother that, I mean, she lived a life of Christ, and I'm not doubting that. I do believe the woman was saved. I believe that she went to heaven, but she wasn't any happier being fake and pretending like everything was perfect. I realized when I was trying to make it through school, find a place to live long enough to be able to finish out a semester, I realized that I didn't have to be this person that other people thought I needed to be, because really I wasn't happy trying to please and be someone else. So I think it did allow me to not provide so much judgment on myself, because we are supposed to make mistakes. You actually can't learn lessons unless you make mistakes. I can still be a good person, be a good Christian. Now, I will say faith-wise, during that time, that's when I got the closest to God. And I realized that I look at God like a father. Maybe it's because I didn't have one. I look back at all of those life circumstances of growing up in subsidized housing, playing with kids outside who were from a certain socioeconomic background, but then going to school with kids who are middle class, who live near my grandmother. And just that constant back and forth, I think that was a blessing for me because I could have. Honestly, seeing what my brother and I saw, I'm surprised that I did not become a person who was just I don't believe in God. Mm-hmm. But I think because I didn't have that father and I could see those silver linings of how things were set up to benefit me when they probably shouldn't have, and realizing that was, a divine intervention. Yeah, a divine intervention. And I think that God can take on all sorts of different approaches with people. I feel like God takes on those faces of what we need in life at that.
He truly is a provider. That's the attribute I think that's highlighted here. He shows up exactly when we need him, where we need him, for the exact measure that we need him. And I know how deeply your grandmother's death affected you. She was your caregiver. She loved you fiercely, so I don't want anyone to misunderstand that. She was a deeply loving woman, but her passing exposed a culture that values appearance over truth. Too often we're bound by others' checklists instead of asking ourselves, who am I? What am I meant to be? And it was courageous, I think, of you to find that clarity and embrace your authentic self. Now, speaking of authenticity, let's talk about parenthood. I'm wondering how that come as you are mentality has translated into parenting and maybe even friendships. So what does it look like day to day with your kids and with your mom friends?
Time. This being authentic has carried over into my parenthood journey as well, and friendship journey. I think that's why I have some of the friends that I have, is because I do have this no judgment, come as you are mentality. But with my kids, and a lot of mothers and fathers, if they listen to this, probably feel the same way. There's always this competitive nature, and I am not competitive. When I had my oldest son, Deegan, I noticed there was just this competitiveness. It's almost it created this culture of my kid did this and my kids advanced because they did this and this and this. And I realized early on, I didn't like that. I wanted mom friends who were I walked in and my kid was on the ground eating dog food. I want the friends who are going to be real and honest about the struggles, because I do think, and I think it's getting better, being your true self. But yeah, back when we were growing up, there wasn't body positivity. You had to be a certain way. And that my grandmother, even though she was a truly loving person, and I'm so thankful for her and the life that she was able to give me. But, it was, you got to be skinny. You got to have big blonde hair. You got to be pretty. You got to act a certain way. You got to go to church. You got to put on this face. I was told early on, don't ever leave the house without makeup on. There was this view of how you were supposed to be. And in some way, it was symbolic when she passed, because I started realizing, wow, I don't have to be a certain way. I really don't care what people think. I just care what God thinks of me and what I need to be doing. And am I living in my purpose and my passion and being my most authentic self? Because I think God created us to be who we are, to go through what we've gone through so that we can help guide others along.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons we started this podcast, was to give everyone a seat at the table and the freedom to be real. I love how fiercely authentic you are and how you welcome people exactly as they are, even when they're still figuring it out. Too often, I think, whether in church or social media or those picture perfect family photos, we only see highlight reels. smiling couples, spotless homes, flawless kids. We never see the car ride arguments or the messy behind the scenes moments. That's why spaces where you're allowed to be genuinely vulnerable is so refreshing, because you can't have authenticity without some sort of vulnerability.
I do want to hit on some statistics because Ashley and I both do come from abandonment, of not having father figures, of, that lack of worth. And when you hear her journey too, you'll hear that in hers as well. But I do, you know me, I'm a nerd when it comes to some research. So 1 in 4 children in the United States, which is 18.4 million, live without some type of father figure in the home. I'm surprised. I thought it would be more, but it's 1 in 4. And this is so true. The research shows that the absence of a father leave long-lasting effects, particularly on daughters, such as increased risk of depression and anxiety. Check, I've got that. Lower self-esteem and trust in relationships. Higher likelihood of early sexual activity and teen pregnancy. We didn't get that. And then greater difficulty forming a stable sense of identity. Because I don't feel like you and I really established our true identity until like mid-30s. Early 30s.
I'll tell you the truth, I think I'm still discovering who I am.
I do too. I think I am too. It's almost like we were but we didn't start really looking at who we are until after we were 30. And I think that's another thing, that we get competitive and we feel like it's a race, and it's not a race. It's not a race.
Listen, I think it really comes down to maturity. Our priorities shift, our perspectives change, and we move beyond that phase of simply establishing ourselves. With growing self-awareness, we begin to recognize our purpose, our unique gifts, and how they all come together to form who we are.
Yeah.
Ultimately, our identities, if y'all don't know this, are defined by what we give to the world. God's gifts within us that we are meant to share.
So I've got this quote on a Post-it note on my computer, and it says, "He left a hole." So that abandoning father left a hole, but God filled it with his purpose. So it doesn't matter if you come from a place of abandonment or being unwanted. It doesn't matter, because, that the damage was done. It's there. You are validated in knowing that that pain, that hurt is there. I still hurt. I'm 40 years old, and I still get angry, and I still hurt, but it doesn't matter, because God sees that hole and he fills it with purpose and passion.
Yeah, because I think it's really important that we understand that facts are not feelings. Feelings are valid, but just because we feel abandoned doesn't mean that we are. Just because we feel unworthy doesn't mean that we are. So please keep that in mind. We're going to end today, I think, by reading Andrea's favorite verse, life verse. It's Ecclesiastes 3:1. You want to read it, Andrea?
There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. I love that, but it just goes back to, I think that we're supposed to experience certain things. The Bible literally says that there will be all sorts of seasons, but there are lessons and there are blessings on the other side of that too. And so just knowing that there is a time for hurt, but there's also a time for healing as well. Definitely write in, send us an email. It'll be on our podcast. Add us on social media. If you're going through a tough time, if you're going through a season of abandonment, please reach out. That's why we created this podcast, to be a place for all of us to, have a seat at the table. Reach out if you need anything. And until then, we should do
this more often.
Bye, guys.